I'm done, Nora. Jonathan Morris's voice shattered the silence at her father's graveside. The casket was still being lowered. The pastor was still praying. She was 8 months pregnant with his child. Done with what? Nora looked up from her father's grave, her hand resting on her swollen belly, tears streaming down her face. Jonathan stood over her, his voice loud enough for everyone to hear. Done with this marriage. Done pretending. I'm with Scarlett now. His mistress stepped forward, hand resting on her supposedly pregnant stomach, fake sympathy in her eyes. She's carrying my child, my real future. Nora's breath caught in her throat. Right there. At her father's funeral. In front of everyone. His parents watched from behind him, arms crossed, satisfied smiles barely hidden. The mourners stared in shock. Some looked away in embarrassment. Nora knelt there in the dirt beside her father's grave, losing everything in that single moment. But Jonathan made one catastrophic mistake. He had no idea who Thomas Stevens really was. He had no idea what her father had built in secret. And he had absolutely no idea what storm was about to be unleashed on him. Before we dive in, we need to go back to how it all started. But first, make sure you subscribe to this channel and watch till the very end, because what happens next? You wouldn't want to miss it. Now, let's dive into the story. The cemetery was quiet except for the sound of dirt hitting mahogany. Nora Stevens knelt at the edge of her father's grave, her hand instinctively protecting her swollen belly, trying to breathe through pain that had nothing to do with pregnancy. The sky above Riverside Cemetery hung thick with gray clouds, matching the suffocating weight pressing down on her chest. Thomas Stevens was gone. The man who raised her alone after her mother passed when she was 12. The man who taught her that quiet strength could move mountains. The man who called her my brilliant girl every single day of her life. He was now 6 feet under, and Nora had never felt more alone. Her husband, Jonathan, stood beside her, but he might as well have been a stranger. His hand was cold in hers, his body rigid, his eyes fixed on something beyond the casket being lowered into the earth. She squeezed his fingers, desperate for comfort, for connection, for anything that reminded her she wasn't completely abandoned. He pulled away. The pastor's voice droned on about ashes to ashes, dust to dust, about God's mercy and eternal rest. But Nora heard none of it. She was watching Jonathan's jaw clench, watching his eyes dart toward his mother Eleanor, watching the way Scarlett Grant, his assistant, stood just a little too close to his family, hand resting on her belly in a gesture that made Nora's stomach turn. Something was wrong. Something had been wrong for months, but grief had blinded her to it. Nora. Jonathan's voice cut through the pastor's prayer like a knife. She looked up at him, confused, still clinging to the hope that whatever was happening wasn't what every instinct in her body was screaming. Jonathan took a step back, creating distance between them. I need to say something. His voice was loud now, projecting across the small gathering of mourners. I need everyone here to witness this. Nora's blood turned to ice. Jonathan, what are you? I'm leaving you. The words came out flat, emotionless, rehearsed. This marriage is over. I'm with Scarlett now. She's pregnant with my child, the child I actually want. The world tilted. Gasps rippled through the mourners. Someone's aunt clutched her chest. Her father's business associates, men in expensive suits she'd never met before, exchanged glances of disbelief. What? Nora's voice came out as barely a whisper, drowned out by the pounding of her heart. You've been dead weight for years, Jonathan continued, his voice growing stronger, crueler. Your father was a small-time business owner who could barely keep his company afloat. You brought nothing to this marriage except neediness and mediocrity. I deserve better than this. Eleanor Morris stepped forward, her designer heels sinking slightly into the cemetery grass. It's for the best, Nora. You must see that. Jonathan needs a partner who can actually contribute to our family's legacy. Not someone who... She gestured vaguely at Nora kneeling in the dirt. Not someone like you. Scarlett moved closer to Jonathan, sliding her arm through his, her diamond bracelet catching the gray light. I'm sorry it has to be this way, she said, her voice dripping with false compassion. But sometimes love finds you when you least expect it. Jonathan and I, we just couldn't fight what we felt. Nora stared at them, her mind unable to process what was happening. Her father's funeral. She was 8 months pregnant. And her husband was publicly humiliating her, destroying her, with his mistress and his family backing him up like this was some kind of staged intervention. Are you serious right now? Her voice finally found strength, rising with a mixture of shock and rage. My father died 3 days ago. I'm 8 months pregnant with your child. And you're doing this here. Jonathan's face remained cold. The timing isn't ideal, but waiting would only make it harder. You're strong, Nora, or at least your father always said you were. You'll figure something out. This is cruel. The words barely made it past the lump in her throat. This is honest, Eleanor interjected. We've been patient with you, dear. But our family has standards, and quite frankly, you've never met them. Your father's little business ventures, your lack of social connections, your background. The pause before that last word carried the weight of everything she wasn't saying out loud. It was a mistake from the beginning. Nora's father's closest friend, Marcus Webb, a man she'd known as Uncle Marcus her whole life, took a step forward. This is disgraceful. Thomas's funeral? Have you people lost your minds? Jonathan's father, Richard Morris, fixed Marcus with a cold stare. Stay out of Morris family business. The casket reached the bottom of the grave with a soft thud that echoed through Nora's chest. Her father was gone. Her marriage was over. And she was being destroyed in front of everyone who came to pay respects to the man who'd meant everything to her. Nora placed her hand over her father's grave, the fresh dirt cool under her palm. She wanted to scream. She wanted to disappear. She wanted to rewind time to 3 days ago when her father was still alive and could tell her what to do, how to survive this. But Thomas Stevens was gone. And Nora was completely, utterly alone. What she didn't know, what none of them knew, was that her father had anticipated this moment. Thomas Stevens had spent 35 years building an empire in silence, preparing for the day when the people who underestimated his daughter would finally reveal their true nature. In a safety deposit box at Sterling Trust Bank, documents waited. Documents that would change everything. Documents that proved Thomas Stevens wasn't a struggling small business owner. He was a genius who'd amassed $700 million and left every cent of it to his daughter, along with evidence of every betrayal, every lie, and every conspiracy designed to destroy her. Jonathan Morris thought he'd won. Scarlett Grant thought she'd claimed her prize. The Morris family thought they'd successfully removed a problem. They had no idea they'd just made the biggest mistake of their lives. Because Nora Stevens was her father's daughter. And Thomas Stevens had taught her that the most dangerous opponents are the ones you underestimate. The storm was coming. They just couldn't see it yet. But before we continue with how Nora discovered her father's secret empire, make sure you're subscribed to this channel and hit that notification bell. What happens when she finds out the truth? You're not going to believe it. Now, let's get back to the story. Nora stayed at the graveside long after everyone left. Her knees ached from kneeling in the grass. Her back screamed in protest from carrying 8 months of pregnancy, but she couldn't move. Couldn't process what had just happened. The workers had already begun shoveling dirt onto her father's casket. The sound of earth hitting with a rhythm that matched the breaking of her heart. Thomas Stevens. Her father. Her hero. The man who'd worked 3 jobs to send her to college. Who'd walked her down the aisle 2 years ago with tears in his eyes, whispering, "You sure about this one, baby girl?" Like he could already see what she couldn't. Who'd held her hand through every ultrasound appointment for the past 8 months because Jonathan was always too busy with work. She should have listened to that hesitation in her father's voice. Should have paid attention to the way his jaw tightened whenever Jonathan mentioned the Morris family legacy, or how old money recognized real value. Should have noticed how her father had started working longer hours in the past year, coming home with a distant look in his eyes like he was planning something important. But she'd been too busy trying to be the perfect wife. Too busy shrinking herself to fit into Jonathan's world. Too busy ignoring the whispers at Morris family dinners about her humble background and her father's cute little business ventures. The memory of this afternoon's humiliation played on repeat. Jonathan's cold voice announcing their marriage was over. Scarlett's hand on her belly, that practiced gesture of false sympathy. Eleanor Morris's cutting remarks about standards and backgrounds, that loaded pause before the word that really mattered to them. Her race, her father's self-made success instead of inherited wealth, everything that made her not quite right for their precious family. And she just knelt there. Frozen. Unable to defend herself or her father's memory. "I'm sorry, Daddy," she whispered to the grave. "I'm so sorry I let them disrespect you like that. I'm sorry I wasn't strong enough to fight back." The wind picked up, rustling through the old oak trees that lined the cemetery. For a moment, Nora could have sworn she heard her father's voice, the deep rumble that had comforted her through every childhood nightmare, every teenage heartbreak, every moment of doubt. "Never let them see all of you, baby girl. Keep something in reserve." He'd said that to her constantly growing up. When kids at school made comments about her natural hair. When college classmates assumed she was there on charity instead of merit. When the Morris family first made their subtle digs about her father's modest means. Thomas Stevens had taught her that quiet strength was real strength. That the people who needed to announce their power usually had the least of it. That being underestimated was sometimes a gift, if you were patient enough to use it. But what good was that lesson now? Her father was gone. Her marriage was destroyed. Her husband had publicly chosen another woman, a pregnant mistress, over his own pregnant wife. At her father's funeral. In front of everyone. Nora placed both hands on her belly, feeling her daughter kick. Strong kicks. Fighter's kicks. "What am I supposed to do?" she asked the baby. Asked the grave. Asked the universe that had just taken everything from her in the span of 3 days. No answer came except the sound of dirt being shoveled and the distant rumble of thunder promising rain. She finally stood, her body protesting every movement. The cemetery was empty now except for the workers who politely pretended not to notice her tears. Her father's grave was half filled, the headstone already in place. Thomas Stevens. Beloved father. 1958 to 2024. Beloved father. That's all it said. Nothing about the empire he'd built. Nothing about the brilliant mind that had turned nothing into something. Nothing about the man who'd raised a daughter alone and loved her fiercer than anything. Because nobody knew. Nobody had ever known who Thomas Stevens really was. Just like nobody knew who Nora really was. What she was capable of. What her father had prepared her for. She turned to leave, walking slowly toward her car, and that's when she saw him. Uncle Marcus, her father's closest friend, standing beside a black town car, watching her with an expression that held something she couldn't quite identify. Not pity. Something else. Something that looked almost like anticipation. "Nora," he called out. "Your father left some things for you. Important things. When you're ready, call me." He handed her a business card. Not the card for the small consulting firm her father had supposedly owned. This card was heavy stock, embossed lettering, Marcus Webb, Senior Partner, Webb and Associates Legal Trust. Before she could ask what it meant, he was gone. Nora stood in the empty cemetery parking lot, Marcus's card in one hand, the other still protecting her belly, and felt the first drops of rain begin to fall. Everything she'd known was gone. But something else, something she didn't understand yet, was waiting. Her father's voice echoed in her memory one more time, "Keep something in reserve." What had he kept in reserve? And why did Marcus look at her like she was about to discover something that would change everything? The days after the funeral blurred into a nightmare that Nora couldn't escape. She moved through her father's small brick house like a ghost, surrounded by his absence, touching things he'd touched, sitting in chairs where he'd sat, trying to feel close to him and failing. The guest room where she'd been sleeping. She couldn't bear to go back to the home she'd shared with Jonathan. Felt like a prison cell decorated with memories of a life that no longer existed. Her phone had become a weapon of mass destruction. She'd made the mistake of checking social media on day 2, and what she found made her want to throw the device into the nearest river. Jonathan had been busy crafting his narrative. Posts about choosing authentic happiness over comfortable lies. Photos of him and Scarlett at some upscale restaurant, her hand prominently displayed on her belly, his arm around her shoulders. The caption read, "Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is admit a mistake and choose the life you're meant to live. Grateful for second chances and new beginnings." The comments were worse. Jonathan's friends and colleagues flooding the post with support. "So proud of you for following your heart. It takes courage to leave a toxic situation. You deserve happiness, bro." Toxic situation. As if she'd been the problem. As if he hadn't abandoned his pregnant wife at her father's funeral. Scarlett had posted too, of course. A black and white photo of her and Jonathan, foreheads touching, both smiling. "Love finds you when you least expect it." Sometimes the heart knows what the mind hasn't figured out yet. Blessed beyond measure. Blessed. The word made Nora's stomach turn. The Morris family had been more subtle, but no less effective. Eleanor's carefully worded post about family transitions and supporting our son through difficult decisions had generated hundreds of likes from their social circle. The subtext was clear. Nora had been the difficult decision. The burden they were all relieved to be rid of. Nobody mentioned the funeral. Nobody talked about the cruelty of the timing. Nobody seemed to care that a man had just been buried and his daughter had been destroyed in the same afternoon. Nora stopped looking after that. Deleted the apps from her phone. Ignored the calls from former friends who wanted to hear her side, like this was some kind of entertainment for them. She spent most of her time in her father's study, the one room in the house that still felt safe. It was small and cluttered, filled with filing cabinets and old books, a desk covered in papers, and the faint smell of the coffee he'd drunk by the gallon. She'd been sorting through his belongings, trying to understand the administrative nightmare of closing out someone's life. Death certificates. Bank accounts. Bills that still needed paying. Her father had been organized to the point of obsession. Every document labeled and filed. Every receipt saved. Every bank statement accounted for. But the numbers didn't make sense. The modest checking account he'd used for household expenses. The small savings account he told her was for emergencies. They matched what she'd always believed about his finances. Comfortable but not wealthy. Getting by but not thriving. So why did Marcus Webb's business card say legal trust? Why had her father needed a senior partner at a law firm that, according to a quick Google search, specialized in estate planning for high-net-worth individuals? It was on the 5th day after the funeral, while pulling out files from the bottom drawer of his desk, that everything changed. The drawer stuck as she tugged it, and when she forced it open, something fell from underneath. A large manila envelope, sealed with red wax, her name written across the front in her father's handwriting, "For Nora, when you need this most." Her hands shook as she broke the seal. Inside was a letter, handwritten on her father's stationery, and a small silver key attached to a tag that read Sterling Trust Bank Vault 712. "My dearest Nora," the letter began, and just seeing his handwriting made her throat close up with grief. "If you're reading this, I'm gone, and I pray to God you never needed this envelope. But knowing the world we live in, knowing the man you married and the family he comes from, I prepared for the worst. Baby girl, I need you to go to Sterling Trust Bank. Give them this key and your ID. Vault 712 contains documents that will change everything you think you know about your old man. I wasn't just a small business consultant, sweetheart. That was the cover story. The safe story. The story that let me move through the world without attracting the wrong kind of attention. The truth is, I spent 35 years building something nobody knew about. Real estate developments across 6 states. Tech investments that multiplied beyond my wildest dreams. Strategic acquisitions in companies most people have never heard of, but use every single day. I built an empire, Nora. $700 million in assets, all structured to protect you completely. Jonathan has no claim to any of it. His family has no power here. Everything is yours." Nora's vision blurred. She had to read the paragraph 3 times before the words made sense. $700 million. Her father who'd clipped coupons and bought generic brands and driven a 15-year-old Toyota, had accumulated $700 million. "I know you're in shock," the letter continued, like he could anticipate her reaction from beyond the grave. "I know you're probably sitting in my study right now, thinking this has to be a mistake or some kind of sick joke. It's not. Go to the bank. See for yourself. But here's what you need to know, and I need you to really hear me on this. I saw what Jonathan was. I've known for 18 months that he was cheating on you with that woman from his office. I hired investigators. I documented everything. The affair, his family's involvement in pushing him toward it, the payments they made to her, all of it." The words hit like physical blows. 18 months. Her father had known for 18 months and never said a word. Never warned her. Never. "I didn't tell you because you weren't ready to hear it," the letter continued, again anticipating her thoughts. "You loved him. You wanted to believe in your marriage. And I couldn't bear to watch you defend him and doubt yourself. I couldn't be the one to break your heart. So instead, I built you armor. I gave you weapons. I made sure that when the truth finally revealed itself, and it always does, baby girl, you'd have everything you needed to fight back. The vault contains more than just account statements and property deeds. There are evidence files. Photos, text messages, financial transactions, timeline documentation of the entire affair. Marcus has copies of everything as well. Between the two of you, you'll have enough proof to destroy anyone who tries to hurt you. Nora's tears were falling freely now, spotting the paper, but she kept reading. I built this for you. All of it. Every investment, every property, every dollar was always meant to be yours. I lived small so I could leave you something massive. I stayed invisible so you could emerge powerful. I saw what he was, Nora. I saw what they all were. And I made sure you'd have the resources to show them exactly who you are. Use it wisely. Use it strategically. And remember what I always taught you, never let them see all of you. Keep something in reserve. I love you more than words can express. I always have. I always will. Now go show them what a Stevens woman is made of. Oh my love, Dad. Nora sat in her father's chair, holding his letter, and felt something shift deep inside her chest. Grief was still there, sharp and overwhelming. But underneath it, something else was growing. Something her father had planted with years of preparation and watered with his final gift. Power. Strategy. Purpose. She looked at the key in her hand, then at the letter, then at the framed photo on her father's desk. The two of them at her college graduation, his arm around her shoulders, both of them grinning at the camera. Oh, Daddy, she whispered. What did you do? Tomorrow, she'd go to Sterling Trust Bank. Tomorrow, she'd open Vault 712. Tomorrow, she'd start understanding the empire her father had built in silence. But tonight, she sat in his study and felt the first stirrings of something the Morris family would soon learn to fear, a woman with nothing left to lose and everything to gain. Nora walked into Sterling Trust Bank the next morning feeling like she was moving through someone else's life. The building was downtown, all glass and marble, the kind of place that catered to people with wealth she'd never imagined having. She clutched her father's key and the letter, her other hand instinctively protecting her belly as she approached the reception desk. I'm here to access Vault 712, she said quietly. Thomas Stevens's vault. The receptionist's expression shifted immediately from polite to reverent. Ms. Stevens. We've been expecting you. Mr. Chun is waiting. Robert Chun met her in a private conference room on the 40th floor. He was in his 60s, sharp-eyed and elegant, with the calm authority of someone who'd spent decades protecting powerful people. When he shook her hand, his grip was firm but kind. Your father was one of the most brilliant men I've ever known, he said, gesturing for her to sit. I'm deeply sorry for your loss, Nora. Thomas talked about you constantly. Everything he built was for you. He opened a leather portfolio on the table between them, and Nora's world exploded for the second time in 24 hours. $700 million wasn't just a number. It was an empire. Commercial real estate across 6 states, Atlanta, Charlotte, Miami, Austin, Denver, Seattle. A 15% stake in a tech company that had gone public 8 years ago and quadrupled in value. Municipal bonds, blue-chip stocks, private equity investments in startups that were now household names. Development projects that had quietly reshaped city skylines while her father's name stayed buried in the fine print. He diversified brilliantly, Robert explained, walking her through document after document. Different industries, different markets, different risk levels. Even if half of this collapsed tomorrow, you'd still be set for life. But it won't collapse. Your father was meticulous. Nora's hands trembled as she flipped through property deeds, investment statements, business holdings. How did he hide this? How did nobody know? Because he understood something most wealthy people never learn. Invisibility is protection. He lived modestly, drove an old car, shopped at regular stores, paid himself a small salary from his consulting business while the real money grew quietly in the background. Robert's expression hardened slightly. He also understood that certain people would try to use you if they knew. People like Jonathan Morris. The name made Nora's chest tighten. Robert pulled out another folder, this one thicker, marked with red tabs. Your father hired investigators 18 months ago. The moment he suspected Jonathan was unfaithful, he started documenting everything. Robert opened the file, revealing what looked like a prosecutorial case. Timeline of the affair, starting in March of last year. Photos, text messages, hotel receipts. Jonathan and Scarlett Grant, his assistant, meeting regularly for over a year. Each page felt like a knife wound. Evidence of every lie Jonathan had told. Every late night at the office. Every business trip that wasn't really business. Here's where it gets interesting, Robert continued, his voice taking on an edge. 3 weeks before your father's funeral, Eleanor Morris transferred $15,000 to Scarlett Grant's personal account. The memo line says consulting services, but we both know what it was really for. They paid her, Nora whispered. His family paid his mistress. To ensure she stayed in the picture. To give Jonathan an exit strategy from your marriage. Robert pulled out another document. And this is the medical record our investigator obtained. Scarlett Grant hasn't been pregnant. Ever. Her last gynecological exam was 2 months ago. She's not carrying anyone's child. The rage that swept through Nora was so intense she had to grip the table to stay grounded. Everything, the funeral humiliation, the public betrayal, Scarlett's hand on her belly, all of it was a calculated lie backed by Jonathan's family's money. Robert's phone buzzed, and he glanced at it. Diana Foster just arrived. She's been managing your father's investment portfolio for 20 years. Between the two of us, we'll help you understand everything Thomas built. Diana turned out to be a woman in her 50s with steel-gray hair and eyes that missed nothing. She sat down across from Nora and didn't waste time on pleasantries. Your father was a genius, she said bluntly. Not just at making money, but at strategy. He understood that real power doesn't announce itself. It waits. It watches. It strikes when the moment is perfect. She leaned forward. He taught you the same skill, didn't he? How to be underestimated. Nora thought about all those years of Morris family dinners where she'd smiled politely through their condescension. All those times she'd made herself smaller to avoid conflict. He said never let them see all of you. Exactly. And now it's time to use that. Diana opened her tablet, showing Nora a network diagram that looked like something from a spy thriller. Your father wasn't just wealthy. He was connected. Silent partner in 5 major development firms. Advisory board member for 3 Fortune 500 companies, all under shell corporations. He moved through elite circles without anyone knowing Thomas Stevens of modest means was actually Thomas Stevens the kingmaker. Why? Nora's voice cracked. Why hide all of this? Because he was protecting you, Robert said gently. Everything is structured in trusts with you as the sole beneficiary. Jonathan has zero claim. His family has no power here. Your father built legal walls that would take an army of lawyers decades to penetrate. This is yours, completely and untouchably. Diana pulled up another document on her tablet. Your father also left what he called contingency protocols. Detailed plans for various scenarios, divorce, custody battles, reputation attacks. He anticipated everything and gave you the tools to fight back. Nora stared at the evidence files, the financial statements, the strategic plans her father had left like weapons in an arsenal. Everything she'd lost at that funeral, her dignity, her marriage, her sense of safety, could be reclaimed. Not just reclaimed. Avenged. What do you want to do, Nora? Robert asked quietly. You have options now. Many options. Nora placed her hand on the folder containing evidence of Jonathan's betrayal, of his family's conspiracy, of every lie that had been told. She thought about her father, who'd built an empire in silence so his daughter could roar when the time was right. I want them to know my father's name, she said, her voice steady for the first time in days. I want them to understand exactly what they dismissed. And I want them to regret every single moment they underestimated Thomas Stevens's daughter. Diana smiled, cold and approving. Then let's get to work. Jonathan Morris couldn't sleep anymore. He'd lie awake at 3 a.m. in Scarlett's downtown apartment, staring at the ceiling, replaying every decision that had led him here. The apartment that had seemed so exciting 4 months ago, modern, sophisticated, free from the responsibilities of marriage, now felt like a trap decorated with lies he was only beginning to see. Beside him, Scarlett slept peacefully, her hand resting on her stomach in that practiced gesture she'd perfected. 4 months pregnant, she claimed. But there was no bump, no weight gain, no midnight cravings or morning sickness or any of the symptoms he'd watched Nora experience. Just Scarlett's flat stomach and increasingly elaborate excuses. "The doctor says I'm carrying small," she told him when he first questioned it. "It's my body type. Some women don't show until the third trimester." He'd wanted to believe her. Needed to believe her. Because if Scarlett wasn't pregnant, then everything he destroyed at that cemetery, his marriage, his reputation, Nora's trust, had been for nothing. His phone buzzed on the nightstand. A text from his mother: "We need to talk. Now. Come to the house." Jonathan dressed quietly and drove to his parents' estate in Buckhead, dreading whatever Eleanor Morris had discovered. She met him in the library, her face tight with the kind of controlled fury that had terrified him since childhood. "Tell me you've seen the Business Council newsletter," she said without preamble, shoving her tablet at him. The headline made his stomach drop: "New Philanthropic Force. Nora Stevens pledges $1 million to Small Business Incubator." Below it was a photo of Nora at some charity dinner, looking radiant despite being 9 months pregnant, seated at a VIP table beside Marcus Webb and several people Jonathan recognized as major players in Atlanta's business community. "That's impossible," he stammered. Her father was. Her father was apparently a lot more than we thought. Eleanor's voice was ice. "I've been hearing things, Jonathan. Whispers at the club. Questions from people I've been trying to impress for years. They're all asking about Thomas Stevens's daughter. About her inheritance. About properties and investments nobody knew existed." Jonathan's mind raced. Thomas Stevens had driven a Toyota, lived in a modest house, dressed like someone who shopped at department stores. There has to be a mistake. Maybe she took out loans or... "She's sitting on boards, Jonathan. The Chamber of Commerce. The Urban Development Fund. These aren't positions you buy your way into. These are positions you inherit when you have real power." Eleanor leaned forward. "What exactly did you walk away from?" Before he could answer, his phone rang. His father, Richard, had done some digging. The properties Thomas Stevens owned, or rather, the properties various trusts owned that traced back to Thomas Stevens, were worth hundreds of millions. The tech investments. The development projects. All of it real. All of it now belonging to the woman Jonathan had humiliated at her father's funeral. "I need to think," Jonathan muttered, leaving before his mother could berate him further. He drove back to Scarlett's apartment, his mind spinning with implications he didn't want to face. Scarlett was awake when he returned, making coffee, wearing one of his shirts. Still no visible pregnancy. "We need to talk," he said, his voice harder than intended. "About the baby. About doctor's appointments. I want to come to the next one." Her hand froze on the coffee pot. "Jonathan, I've told you. My doctor prefers." "I don't care what your doctor prefers. I'm coming." He stepped closer. "You're 4 months pregnant, Scarlett. Almost 5. I should have heard a heartbeat by now. Seen an ultrasound with your name on it. Been to at least 1 appointment. Are you accusing me of lying?" Her voice turned sharp, defensive in a way that made alarm bells scream in his head. "I'm saying I need proof. Real proof. Not photos you could have downloaded. Not excuses about privacy policies. Actual medical confirmation that you're carrying my child." Scarlett's face transformed. The soft, vulnerable expression she usually wore vanished, replaced by something calculating and cold. "After everything you did for me? After you left your wife at a funeral? Now you want to question me?" "Yes," Jonathan said, "because something doesn't add up. Nothing about this adds up." The fight that followed was brutal. Scarlett deflecting, Jonathan pressing, both of them saying things that couldn't be unsaid. It ended with her screaming at him to get out, and him standing in her apartment building's parking garage, feeling like the floor had disappeared beneath his feet. He sat in his car and did what he should have done months ago. He Googled Scarlett Grant. Not the sanitized LinkedIn profile he'd looked at when she first started at his firm, but deep searches. Social media history. Public records. What he found made him physically ill. Scarlett Grant had worked at 3 different firms in 3 different cities over the past 6 years. Each time, she'd been involved with a married executive. Each time, there had been whispers of a convenient pregnancy. Each time, she'd received a substantial settlement or payment before moving on. Boston, Philadelphia, Charlotte, and now Atlanta. She was a professional, and he'd been the easiest mark she'd ever found. Jonathan's hands shook as he pulled up Nora's number. It went straight to voicemail. He tried again, and again. Each time, voicemail. Nora, it's me. I know you don't want to talk to me, but I need to tell you something. About Scarlett. He stopped, unsure how to put his growing horror into words. Please call me back. He tried texting. I think I made a terrible mistake. Can we talk? No response. Over the next week, his messages became more desperate, more honest. The careful pride that had let him walk away at that cemetery crumbling under the weight of what he was discovering. Nora, I saw you at the business council dinner. I need to understand what's happening. Your father, nobody told me about. Please, I just need to talk to you. Silence. I don't think Scarlett's pregnant. I think she's been lying this whole time. God, Nora, I think my family paid her. I think this was all planned and I was too stupid to see it. Still nothing. His final voicemail came at 2 a.m, sitting in his car outside the apartment he could no longer afford, facing the reality of what he'd done. I destroyed everything, didn't I? I left you at your father's funeral, while you were pregnant with our child. Because I believed a woman I barely knew over the wife who'd never given me a reason to doubt her. I let my family manipulate me into abandoning you at your lowest moment. And you're not the one who's broken. I am. I'm the one who threw away something real for something fake. I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't even expect you to respond. I just need you to know that I see it now. I see what I did. And I'm so sorry. He hung up and sat in the darkness, knowing that sorry wasn't enough. Knowing that Nora was somewhere out there, apparently powerful in ways he'd never imagined, probably reading his messages and feeling nothing but the satisfaction of watching him realize what he'd lost. And the worst part? She'd be right to feel that way. He'd made his choice at that cemetery. Now he had to live with every consequence. Nora chose her first public appearance with the precision of a chess master opening a game. The business council dinner at the St. Regis. Exactly the kind of event the Morris family frequented. Exactly the kind of room where whispers became currency and reputations were made or destroyed in a single evening. She wore emerald green, a color that made her dark skin glow under the chandeliers. Her natural hair was styled in elegant goddess locks that fell past her shoulders. 9 months pregnant, she moved through the room with a confidence that came from knowing she had $700 million in assets and nothing left to lose. Diana Foster had arranged everything. The VIP table. The seat next to Marcus Webb, who turned out to be not just her father's friend but his silent business partner in half a dozen major developments. The carefully timed entrance that guaranteed maximum visibility. Eleanor Morris saw her first. Nora watched the color drain from her former mother-in-law's face as recognition hit. Eleanor had been holding court near the bar, surrounded by her usual circle of old-money socialites, when her gaze landed on Nora sitting at a table she could never have accessed before. A table Eleanor had been trying to get invited to for years. Their eyes met across the room. Nora smiled. Not a friendly smile. The kind of smile that said everything had changed and Eleanor was only beginning to understand how much. The evening's program included a segment on major donors, and when Nora's name was called, Nora Stevens, pledging $1 million to the Atlanta Small Business Incubator, the room erupted in applause. People turned to look at her, this mystery woman who'd appeared from nowhere with the kind of money that demanded respect. Marcus stood with her, his hand on her shoulder in a gesture of both support and claim. Nora's father, Thomas Stevens, was one of the most brilliant investors I've ever known, he told the room. He built an empire quietly, and now his daughter is carrying that legacy forward by supporting the kind of entrepreneurs he believed in. The whispers started immediately. Thomas Stevens? The consultant? That Thomas Stevens had money like this? How did nobody know? And if his daughter has this kind of wealth, why did Jonathan Morris? Nora could see the questions forming on faces throughout the room. Could see the narrative Jonathan had carefully constructed beginning to crack and crumble. Over the next 3 weeks, Nora's emergence was strategic and relentless. She accepted positions on the Chamber of Commerce Board and the Urban Development Fund. She attended gallery openings and charity luncheons, always impeccably dressed, always gracious, always surrounded by her father's former associates who materialized like protective spirits. The media couldn't get enough of the story. Mystery heiress. Thomas Stevens' hidden empire ran in the Business Journal with a photo of Nora at a ribbon-cutting ceremony for a community center her father's foundation was funding. The article detailed properties, investments, and business ventures that had existed in the shadows for decades, while Thomas Stevens lived like a man of modest means. The comments section exploded. People who'd known Thomas. People who'd underestimated him. And hundreds of people asking the same question. Didn't she just get divorced? Didn't her husband leave her at her father's funeral? Is he insane? Nora moved into her father's real residence during her 9th month, a stunning waterfront estate in Ansley Park that had been held in trust under a corporate name. The house had 6 bedrooms, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the river, and a library that smelled like leather and old money. This was where Thomas Stevens had actually lived, where he'd planned his strategies and built his empire while maintaining a modest house in a middle-class neighborhood as his public face. Every appearance Nora made was calculated with Diana's help. Every donation timed for maximum impact. Every interview carefully scripted to paint a picture of a woman honoring her father's legacy while never directly mentioning her ex-husband or his family. She didn't need to mention them. Other people did it for her. At the country club where Eleanor Morris had reigned for 20 years, women who'd once looked down on Nora now whispered about what a catch she'd been. "Old money isn't real money anymore," Nora overheard one woman say. "It's all inherited pride and dwindling trust funds." But Thomas Stevens built something real, and his daughter has it all now. Jonathan's colleagues at his firm started treating him differently. The story of him serving divorce papers at a funeral had spread, and now that people understood what Nora was worth, the narrative had shifted from brave man following his heart to fool who threw away a fortune. His boss pulled him aside one afternoon. "The optics aren't good, Morris. Leaving your pregnant wife at her father's funeral, and it turns out she's worth more than our entire executive board combined? It's making the firm look bad by association." Nora heard about it through Marcus, who heard about it through a network of connections that seemed to know everything happening in Atlanta's business world. She felt no satisfaction in Jonathan's suffering. Just the cold certainty that consequences were unfolding exactly as they should. Her father's associates revealed themselves one by one. The tech CEO who'd taken Thomas's early investment and turned it into billions. The real estate developer who'd partnered with Thomas on projects that reshaped city skylines. The venture capitalist who'd learned everything she knew from Thomas Stevens's quiet genius. They all protected Nora now, surrounding her with a network of power that made the Morris family's old money connections look quaint and irrelevant. 3 weeks before her due date, Nora stood in her father's library, her library now, looking out at the river and feeling her daughter kick strong and steady. Jonathan had called 17 times that week. She'd listened to none of the voicemails. Whatever he had to say didn't matter anymore. She'd already won. He just didn't fully understand how much he'd lost yet. But he would. Soon. When the final piece of her father's plan fell into place, everyone would understand exactly what happened when you underestimated a Stevens woman. Nora's water broke during a strategy meeting with Diana Foster, 3 days before her due date. They'd been reviewing final details for the Thomas Stevens Foundation Gala when she felt the first contraction, sharp enough to make her grip the conference table. "Hospital," Diana said calmly, already gathering documents. "But bring the presentation files. You'll want something to focus on between contractions." Presbyterian Hospital's private maternity suite looked more like a luxury hotel than a medical facility. Floor-to-ceiling windows, a sitting area for visitors, and enough space for Diana to set up her laptop while nurses monitored Nora's vitals. Labor progressed slowly, giving them hours to finalize the gala presentation between waves of pain. "The timeline of the affair goes here," Nora said, pointing at the screen while breathing through a contraction. "Then the evidence of the Morris family payments to Scarlett." "You're terrifying," Diana said with something close to admiration. "You know that, right? Most women in labor aren't plotting the systematic destruction of their ex-husband's reputation. Most women weren't humiliated at their father's funeral." Nora leaned back as another contraction hit. "My dad spent 35 years building an empire in silence. The least I can do is spend a few hours in labor making sure his granddaughter inherits a world where people know his name." The baby came at 6:47 p.m., after 14 hours of labor that Nora spent alternating between breathing exercises and approving slide designs. When the doctor placed her daughter in her arms, tiny, perfect, with a full head of dark hair and lungs that announced her arrival to the entire floor, Nora felt something crack open in her chest. "Hello, Thea," she whispered. "Thea Stevens. Your grandfather would have loved you so much." She'd chosen the name weeks ago. Thea, short for Theodora, meaning gift of God. No Morris anywhere in the birth certificate. No acknowledgement of Jonathan's existence except in the legal minimum required. This was Thomas Stevens's granddaughter, not a Morris family heir. Jonathan wasn't called. Wasn't informed. Wasn't present. He'd made his choice at that cemetery. Now he could find out about his daughter the same way everyone else would, through the news. The flowers started arriving within hours. Arrangements from Marcus Webb and Robert Chun. From Diana Foster and her team. From her father's business associates, people Nora was still discovering had been part of Thomas Stevens's hidden empire. From board members of the foundations she joined. From business leaders who saw her as the next generation of Atlanta power. The hospital room looked like a high-end florist had exploded, each arrangement more elaborate than the last. No flowers from the Morris family. No card from Jonathan. Just silence from the people who dismissed her and noise from the ones who recognized her value. The birth announcement hit social media by morning, carefully worded by Diana's publicity team. Nora Stevens welcomes daughter Thea Stevens. Mother and baby healthy and resting. The Stevens family thanks well-wishers for their support during this joyful time. The Business Journal ran it as news. Stevens heiress welcomes daughter, continues father's legacy. The article mentioned her philanthropic work, her board positions, and only briefly noted that she'd recently divorced. No mention of Jonathan by name. He'd been edited out of her narrative completely. Nora spent 2 days in the hospital recovering, Thea sleeping peacefully in her arms while Diana brought updates. The gala invitations had gone out. 600 confirmed guests. Media coverage secured. Every detail of the presentation finalized and devastating. 3 weeks, Diana said. Can you be ready? Nora looked down at her daughter, this tiny human who would grow up knowing her grandfather's true story, who would inherit an empire built on patience and strategy. I'll be ready. On the morning they were discharged, a nurse brought Nora a final item from her hospital bag, a sealed envelope she'd grabbed from her father's desk but hadn't opened. The handwriting on the front read, "For my granddaughter." Nora's hands shook as she opened it. Thea nestled against her chest. "My dearest granddaughter," it began. "I'm writing this before you're born, before I even know if you'll be a girl or a boy, but somehow I know you're a girl. Strong like your mother. Smart like your grandmother. Stubborn like me. By the time you read this, probably when your mother lets you, years from now, you'll know the story of how I built something from nothing. You'll know about the empire I created in silence. You'll know about the people who underestimated your mother and how wrong they were. But here's what I want you to really understand. Wealth isn't the money. It's not the properties or the investments or the zeros in bank accounts. Wealth is the freedom to be yourself completely. Wealth is the power to protect the people you love. Wealth is knowing that no matter what anyone tries to take from you, you have something they can never touch. Your mother has that wealth now. And someday, you will too. Use it wisely. Use it kindly. But never, ever let anyone make you feel small because of where you came from or what you look like or how quiet your power is. The loudest people in the room are usually the weakest. Remember that. I love you, granddaughter. I loved you before you were born. Your mother will make sure you know your grandfather's name. All my love, Thomas Stevens. Nora held Thea closer, tears falling onto the letter, and whispered, "We're going to make him so proud, baby girl. In 3 weeks, everyone will know who Thomas Stevens was. And they'll never forget what happened when they tried to destroy his daughter." Outside the hospital window, Atlanta stretched out beneath a clear sky. Somewhere in the city, Jonathan was probably panicking about the birth announcement. Eleanor Morris was probably calculating damage control. Scarlett Grant was probably planning her exit strategy. Let them panic. Let them calculate. Let them plan. Nora Stevens had already won. The gala would just be the victory lap. The Metropolitan Convention Center's grand ballroom transformed over 5 days into something that looked like a palace. Crystal chandeliers hung from vaulted ceilings. Tables dressed in ivory and gold. A stage with screens large enough to ensure every one of the 600 guests would see every devastating detail of what Nora was about to reveal. Diana walked the space with military precision, checking sightlines, testing audio equipment, ensuring the presentation would display flawlessly. "This needs to be perfect," she said. "Not just good. Perfect. Because what we're doing tomorrow night isn't just exposing lies. We're rewriting history." The Business Journal feature hit newsstands 1 week before the gala, and it was everything Diana had orchestrated. The cover showed Nora holding 3-week-old Thea, both of them bathed in natural light, the waterfront estate visible through windows behind them. The headline read, "Nora Stevens, the billion-dollar daughter no one knew about." The article was thorough and devastating. It detailed Thomas Stevens's 35-year journey from working-class roots to a $700 million empire. It explained his strategy of invisibility, his brilliant diversification, his silent partnerships that had shaped Atlanta's skyline. It mentioned, almost as an aside, that his daughter had recently divorced after her husband left her at her father's funeral, choosing instead to be with his assistant. The comment sections exploded. Social media picked it up within hours. Hashtag Nora Stevens trended nationally by that evening, with thousands of people sharing the story, praising Thomas Stevens's brilliance, and asking the same question over and over: her ex-husband left her? At a funeral? Is he the stupidest man alive? Memes appeared. Think pieces about underestimating black women. Articles analyzing the strategic genius of building wealth invisibly. The story had captured something deeper than gossip. It had become a symbol of poetic justice, of the underestimated rising up, of patience and strategy defeating cruelty and greed. Jonathan's letter arrived by courier on a Tuesday afternoon. Nora almost didn't open it, but curiosity won out. "Nora, I don't expect you to read this. I don't expect anything from you anymore. But I need to say it anyway. I made a terrible mistake. The worst mistake of my life. I destroyed our marriage for a lie. I humiliated you at your father's funeral for a woman who was never pregnant, whose entire existence was a con my family helped finance. I see everything clearly now. The affair. The manipulation. How wrong I was about everything. Please, I'm begging you, let me meet our daughter. Let me try to make this right. I know I don't deserve it. I know I deserve nothing from you. But she's my daughter too, and I need to at least try to be the father I should have been from the beginning. Jonathan." Nora read it once, then filed it with all the other evidence. His desperation would play well on the screens tomorrow night. At the Morris estate in Buckhead, an emergency family meeting was in full crisis mode. Eleanor had the gala invitation in front of her, cream cardstock with gold lettering, and she knew exactly what it represented. "It's a trap," she said, her voice tight. "The Thomas Stevens Foundation Gala. She's inviting us to watch her destroy us." Richard Morris shook his head. "We don't know that. It could just be a charity event." "Don't be naive. She's been positioning herself for months. Strategic appearances, media coverage, board positions. She's building toward something, and this gala is it." Eleanor looked at Jonathan, who sat slumped in a chair looking 10 years older than he had at that funeral. "You did this. You underestimated her. Should we decline the invitation?" Jonathan's sister Margaret asked. "Just not show up? And look like we're hiding? Like we're afraid of her?" Eleanor stood, pacing. "No. We attend. We smile. We act like nothing she says or does can touch us. We control the narrative by being present and unbothered. What if she has evidence?" Jonathan's voice was barely audible. "About Scarlett. About the payments you made." Eleanor's face went cold. "Then we deny everything. It's her word against ours. Old money still means something in this city." But even as she said it, Eleanor knew the truth. Old money didn't mean what it used to. Not when facing someone with $700 million in liquid assets and a dead father's revenge plan. They would attend the gala. All of them. Because not attending would be admission of guilt, and the Morris family didn't admit guilt. They just didn't realize they were walking into an execution. The night before the gala, Diana came to Nora's estate for a final briefing. Thea slept peacefully in her bassinet while the two women reviewed every slide, every piece of evidence, every moment of the presentation that would unfold in less than 24 hours. The affair timeline goes first, Diana said, pulling up the presentation on her laptop. 18 months of documented betrayal. Then the Morris family's payment to Scarlett, $15,000 with bank records showing Eleanor's signature. Then Scarlett's medical records proving no pregnancy. Then Jonathan's voicemails, the desperate ones where he admits everything. Nora studied each slide, feeling no satisfaction, just the calm certainty of a plan perfectly executed. And the finale? Your father's empire. Every property. Every investment. Every dollar that proves Thomas Stevens was 10 times the man any Morris has ever been. Diana closed the laptop. Tomorrow night, we don't just expose them, Nora. We bury them so deep they'll never recover. Good, Nora said quietly, looking at her sleeping daughter. Because they buried my father without knowing who he was. They tried to bury me. Now they'll learn what happens when you underestimate a Stevens woman. Diana stood to leave, then paused at the door. Your father would be so proud of you. You know that, right? Nora touched the locket around her neck, the one containing her father's photo. I hope so. Because everything I'm doing tomorrow, I'm doing it for him. After Diana left, Nora stood at the window overlooking the river, Thea in her arms, and felt the weight of what was coming settle over her shoulders. Tomorrow night, the truth would be revealed. Tomorrow night, justice would be served. Tomorrow night, Thomas Stevens's name would be spoken with the respect it had always deserved. And the people who tried to destroy his daughter would finally understand the cost of their cruelty. The calm before the storm was ending. The storm itself was about to begin. The grand ballroom at the Metropolitan Convention Center gleamed like something out of a fairy tale, except this story wouldn't end with a princess finding her prince. It would end with a queen reclaiming her throne and burning down the kingdom that had tried to exile her. 600 guests filled the space, Atlanta's power brokers, business leaders, politicians, media representatives, and philanthropists who'd paid $5,000 per plate to attend the inaugural Thomas Stevens Foundation Gala. They came for the networking, the prestige, the tax-deductible donation. They had no idea they were about to witness the most spectacular public reckoning in the city's history. Nora arrived exactly on time, not early to show eagerness, not late to create drama, but precisely when the invitation indicated. Her emerald gown fit like it had been designed specifically for this moment, elegant, powerful, impossible to ignore. Her goddess locks fell past her shoulders, styled with gold accessories that caught the chandelier light. For weeks postpartum, she moved with the confidence of a woman who knew she held all the power in the room and was about to use every bit of it. Jonathan saw her first. She watched the color drain from his face as she entered, watched him grip his wine glass so hard she thought it might shatter. Beside him, Scarlett looked uncomfortable in a dress that tried too hard, her hand no longer resting on a non-existent pregnant belly. The lie had apparently been abandoned, though clearly not soon enough. The Morris family occupied a prominent table near the front, Eleanor's doing, no doubt, trying to maintain appearances of importance. Eleanor, Richard, Jonathan's sister Margaret, and several family friends all dressed in their most expensive armor, wearing forced smiles that didn't reach their eyes. They knew something was coming. They just didn't know how bad it would be. Dinner service felt like a countdown. Each course arrived with mounting tension. Conversations around the ballroom buzzed with speculation about Nora's transformation, about Thomas Stevens's hidden empire, about what tonight's program would reveal. The Morris family barely touched their food. Jonathan kept glancing at Nora's table where she sat beside Marcus Webb and Diana Foster, looking relaxed and radiant and absolutely lethal. At 8:30, the lights dimmed slightly. Diana took the stage first, welcoming everyone and explaining the Foundation's mission, supporting small business owners, funding education programs, helping families build generational wealth the way Thomas Stevens had. Then she said the words that made the ballroom go silent. And now, I'd like to invite Thomas's daughter, Nora Stevens, to share the story of why this foundation exists. Nora walked to the stage with measured steps, her heels clicking against marble, each step bringing her closer to the moment she'd been building toward for months. She reached the podium, adjusted the microphone, and looked out at 600 faces all focused on her. Thank you all for being here, she began, her voice steady and clear. 4 months ago, I buried my father at Riverside Cemetery. It was the worst day of my life. Not just because I lost the man who raised me, who loved me unconditionally, who taught me everything I know about strength and dignity, but because it was also the day my husband chose to end our marriage. The room went completely still. This wasn't the polite philanthropy speech they'd expected. He announced it at the graveside, Nora continued, her voice never wavering, while they were lowering my father's casket into the ground, while I was 8 months pregnant with his child, in front of everyone who'd come to pay respects. He told me he was leaving me for his assistant, that she was pregnant with his child, that I was, and I quote, dead weight. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Heads turned toward Jonathan's table. Eleanor Morris looked like she wanted to disappear into the floor. I share this not for sympathy, Nora said, but for context. Because what happened next is a story about people who mistake kindness for weakness, who confuse quiet dignity with insignificance, who underestimate those they think are beneath them. She clicked a button and the screens behind her lit up with a photo of Thomas Stevens, professional, confident, nothing like the modest man most people had assumed he was. My father spent 35 years building something extraordinary. $700 million across real estate, technology investments, and business ventures. The screens showed property after property, investment portfolio after investment portfolio, each one documented and verified. He lived modestly, worked quietly, and let everyone underestimate him, because he understood that real power doesn't announce itself. The numbers on the screen made people gasp. The scope of Thomas Stevens's empire was staggering, undeniable, and now entirely belonging to the woman on stage. But my father also understood something else, Nora continued. He knew that people would try to use me, manipulate me, betray me. So he documented everything. Click. The screens changed to show a timeline, dates, locations, photos of Jonathan and Scarlett together. My husband's affair didn't start recently. It started 18 months ago, March 2023, long before he claimed to suddenly fall in love, long before Scarlett conveniently announced her pregnancy. Jonathan stood up, his chair scraping loudly. Nora, don't. Sit down, Jonathan, Nora said calmly. I'm not finished. He sat, probably because his legs wouldn't hold him anymore. Click. Medical records appeared on screen. Scarlett Grant is not pregnant. Has never been pregnant. This is her gynecological exam from 2 months ago, obtained legally through discovery after I filed for full custody. No pregnancy. No miscarriage. Just a lie designed to ensure my husband wouldn't change his mind about leaving me. Scarlett made a choking sound and fled toward the exit, her heels clicking frantically against the marble. Nobody tried to stop her. Everyone was too transfixed by what was unfolding on stage. Click. Bank records appeared. 3 weeks before my father's funeral, Eleanor Morris transferred $15,000 to Scarlett Grant. The memo line says, consulting services. We both know what it really was. Payment to ensure she stayed in the picture, to give Jonathan an exit strategy from our marriage that the Morris family could orchestrate and control. Eleanor was sheet white, her carefully maintained composure crumbling in real time. And finally, Nora said, her voice taking on an edge, I want you to hear something. Jonathan's voice filled the ballroom through the sound system, his desperate voicemails playing for everyone to hear. I think I made a terrible mistake. I don't think Scarlett's pregnant. I think my family paid her. God, Nora, I destroyed everything for a lie. The devastation in his voice was complete, and hearing it broadcast to 600 people made him look exactly like what he was, a weak man who'd been manipulated into destroying something real for something fake. The ballroom erupted. People standing, some to applaud, some in shock, some rushing to leave before being associated with the Morris family's catastrophic humiliation. Journalists were typing frantically on their phones. Camera flashes went off. The story was already going viral beyond these walls. Nora waited for the noise to die down before speaking her final words. My father taught me that real power is quiet until it needs to roar. He spent 35 years being underestimated, dismissed, treated like he didn't matter by people who thought old money was the only money that counted. He built an empire in silence so that when the moment came, when people showed their true nature, I would have the resources to fight back. She paused, letting that sink in. Tonight, I roared for him. For every person who's been underestimated. For every quiet force that people mistake for weakness. For everyone who's been told they don't matter and then proved exactly how wrong those people were. The standing ovation that followed was thunderous. 600 people on their feet, applauding not just for Nora, but for the poetic justice of watching the underestimated destroy the people who tried to bury her. Nora walked off the stage with the same measured steps she'd used to approach it. She didn't look at Jonathan, frozen in his seat, face buried in his hands. Didn't acknowledge Eleanor Morris, whose social standing had just been demolished beyond repair. Didn't spare a glance for the Morris family table, where everyone sat in stunned, horrified silence. She'd already won. Looking back would just be petty. And Nora Stevens was many things, but petty wasn't one of them. She was her father's daughter. And tonight, she'd shown the entire city exactly what that meant. The ballroom was emptying when Jonathan finally found the courage to approach. Nora was gathering her things, Diana beside her reviewing media requests that were already flooding in, when she felt his presence. She turned slowly, deliberately, making him wait for her attention the way she'd waited for his compassion at that cemetery and received none. "Nora." His voice was hollow, broken. "Can we talk? Please. Just 5 minutes." She looked at Diana, who nodded and stepped away, giving them space but staying close enough to intervene if needed. Nora turned back to Jonathan and waited, saying nothing, giving him nothing. "I destroyed everything for a lie," he said, the words tumbling out desperate and raw. "Scarlett was never pregnant. My family paid her. I left you, at your father's funeral, while you were carrying our child, for a con artist, and I was too stupid, too weak, too blinded by my family's manipulation to see it." "I know," Nora said simply. "I've known for months. My father documented everything before he died." Jonathan's face crumpled. "I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But our daughter, Thea, please let me be part of her life. Let me try to make this right." Nora studied the man she'd once loved, seeing him clearly for the first time. Not the confident businessman she'd married. Not even the cruel stranger who'd handed her divorce papers at a grave. Just a weak man who'd made terrible choices and was only now understanding the cost. "You didn't destroy everything for a lie, Jonathan," she said quietly, her voice steady and final. "You destroyed everything because you never valued what was real. Because you let your family convince you that old money mattered more than integrity. Because when you had a choice between standing beside your wife or impressing your mother, you chose wrong every single time. I know that now. I see it all now. That's not my problem anymore." Nora picked up her bag. "My lawyer will contact you about supervised visitation. Limited. Scheduled. And if you miss even one appointment, if you show Thea even a fraction of the disrespect you showed me, that access will disappear completely. Do you understand?" He nodded, tears streaming down his face. "I understand. Thank you. I don't deserve." "No," Nora interrupted. "You don't. But she deserves the chance to know her father, even if her father doesn't deserve to know her. That's not for you, Jonathan. That's for Thea." She walked away, leaving him standing alone in the emptying ballroom, and didn't look back. The headlines the next morning were everything Diana had orchestrated and more. Stevens' heiress exposes ex-husband's betrayal at charity gala. The $700 million revenge. How Nora Stevens turned humiliation into power. Hashtag Nora Stevens trends as public reckoning goes viral. The story spread beyond Atlanta, beyond business circles, becoming a cultural moment. Think pieces about wealth and race. Discussions about strategic patience versus immediate reaction. 1,000 social media posts from women sharing their own stories of being underestimated and rising above it. Jonathan was fired from his firm within a week for ethics violations and bringing disrepute to the company. Scarlett Grant left Georgia entirely, though word was she faced fraud investigations in 3 states for similar schemes. The Morris family, who'd ruled Atlanta's old money circles for generations, found themselves suddenly exiled, invitations withdrawn, memberships quietly suspended, their name becoming shorthand for the kind of cruelty that wealth couldn't excuse. The custody arrangement gave Jonathan supervised visitation twice monthly. He used it 3 times in 6 months before the appointments became too painful, too confronting of everything he'd lost. Eventually, he stopped showing up entirely. Nora didn't chase him for it. She'd already moved on. The Thomas Stevens Foundation thrived beyond even Diana's projections. $45 million in additional donations poured in from people inspired by the story, wanting to be part of something that represented justice and transformation. They funded 12 small business incubators, established 3 scholarship programs, and partnered with organizations supporting single mothers, all causes Thomas Stevens would have chosen himself. 6 months after the gala, Nora stood at her father's grave with Thea in her arms. The baby was growing fast, already smiling and laughing, reaching for the world with tiny hands that would someday inherit an empire. "Hey, Daddy," Nora said softly, kneeling to place fresh flowers on the headstone. "I brought someone to meet you. This is Thea, your granddaughter. She has your eyes, you know. That same look like she's always thinking 3 steps ahead." Thea gurgled, grabbing at the flowers. "I did it," Nora continued, her voice thick with emotion. "Everything you prepared me for. I showed them who you really were. Who we really are. And they'll never forget it." The wind picked up, rustling through the oak trees, and Nora could almost hear her father's voice, the deep rumble that had guided her through everything. "That's my girl. That's my brilliant, powerful girl. You taught me to move in silence, Dad," Nora whispered. "But you also taught me when to make noise. This was for both of us. For everyone who underestimated the Stevens family. For every person who thought quiet meant weak." She stood, adjusting Thea on her hip, and looked at the headstone one more time. It still just said "Beloved Father," but now everyone in Atlanta knew what those words really meant. Thomas Stevens wasn't just a beloved father. He was a genius, a strategist, a man who'd built an empire in silence and armed his daughter to defend it. Later that afternoon, Nora stood in the lobby of what had been her father's corporate headquarters, the real one, not the modest consulting office he'd maintained as his public face. The building was steel and glass, 14 stories overlooking the city, and the sign above the entrance had been changed to reflect its true ownership, Stevens Legacy Holdings. Thea babbled in her arms, tiny hands reaching for the gleaming letters. Employees passed through the lobby, greeting Nora with respect that had nothing to do with pity and everything to do with recognition of her power, her strategy, her father's legacy living on through her. Diana approached with a tablet. 3 more companies want to pitch partnerships. The mayor wants to meet about development projects. And you've been invited to speak at the National Business Women's Conference. Nora looked at her daughter, then at the company her father had built, then out at the city that had once dismissed them both. Accept them all. We're just getting started. Because this was never just about revenge or justice or proving people wrong. This was about building something lasting. Something her daughter would inherit along with the story of how it came to be. Something that would teach Thea what her grandfather had taught Nora, that quiet power is the most dangerous kind, that patience defeats impulsivity, and that being underestimated is only a weakness if you believe it yourself. From dismissed daughter to empire builder. From grieving wife to unstoppable force. From the woman humiliated at a cemetery to the woman who changed Atlanta's power structure forever. Nora Stevens was exactly who her father had prepared her to be. And the legacy they built together, in silence and then in thunder, would echo for generations. The Morris family had tried to bury her at that funeral. Instead, they'd planted seeds of something they could never control and would spend years regretting. Thomas Stevens had built an empire in silence. His daughter had made sure the world would never stop talking about it. And that, Nora thought as she held her daughter close and looked out at everything they'd inherited, was the most perfect justice of all. Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you enjoyed this story, you will surely love the next one. It's as crazier and more intriguing as you can ever imagine. So do check it out. Click on the image showing on your screen right now to watch the next one.